Hello everyone, BL here, hoping that you are doing well and working on your puzzle one piece at a time. Today I wanted to do this piece on home, the word home, the concept of home, and everything that derives from it when you think of it. Actually, this attaches with the piece that I did on the Wiz, but I think this is important enough that it requires its own separate commentary, if you will. Now, I have a picture here of a family that appears to be sitting around a holiday meal. Now, we won't get into whether it's appropriate holiday meal, celebrating the holidays or not, or whatever. The biggest concern is to see that we have a family here and to get us to recognize what it is that we feel, what emotions are stimulated when we look at this picture. Oftentimes, more often than not, when we think of home, we think of family, we think of multi-generational, we think of all the aunties, the uncles, the cousins, the mom, the dad, the grandmom. We think of, all of that, and the various family gatherings, whether it's indoors, outdoors, the good times and the bad, all of it kind of rolled into one. The foods, the fights, the breaking curfews, the Friday fish fries, your first aha moments, just everything. That's what we think of when we think of home. Um, but how many of us know all the memories that we have, all the experiences that we've had in life is what makes us who we are? So our home and all those memories and all those experiences of home, whatever home is what makes us who we are. It's at home where your socialization begins as a baby, and it continues as far as from your home family, if you will, until you leave home. And then your socialization, obviously, when you go to school, you go off to college, you go to work, and just do the rest of life, your socialization continues, but it begins at home. And so let's talk about what's the importance of home. Why is home so important? Home gives you your identity. You kind of, when you think of home, it's almost as if your shoulders square up and you're ready to rock and roll, fight, do whatever you got to do, stand against whoever you got to stand against, but you're defending home. Home represents, your cheerleaders, your group of people that are you would more often than not show you unconditional love, no matter what. When you think of home, you think of your sense of self, tracking who you are, knowing where you can go, knowing what your abilities are, your strengths, your weaknesses, your sense of self. You derive from your sense of home and all those things that are associated with home. For example, because I was running this by someone else, they didn't quite get that point. When my kids were growing up, and they kind of ran into some moments of not feeling very strong about themselves, I had to remind them of their extended family, some extended family, if you will, and linking that with home, linking that with home experiences that they were growing up with. And I had to remind them, do a survey of all the people that were in the room for a particular event. And they, called out the names of those people. And I asked them, what are those people doing now? What have they done in their lives? What accomplishments have they made? And they started thinking about all of that. I said to them, this is the stock that you come from. So while today is a temporary setback, you're a little down on yourself because things are not going as planned, this is the stock that you come from. So don't give up on what it is you want to do. They didn't give up. They've shown you that you can do it. They've paved the way, not necessarily in this particular endeavor, but just in the overall concept of keep pushing forward. And so they were able to square up their shoulders because thinking of home, doing an assessment of everything that was at home, allowed them to, hey, wait a minute, let me not get stuck in this. Let me square up my shoulders, put up my dukes, and go back in the ring for another round of this fight. So that's where I get that sense of self from. Um, When you think of home, when you can say, I'm XYZ, I'm whoever I am, I'm uh, Shonda Lewis from Bronx, New York, you have a sense of self. Whether it's good, whether it's bad or indifferent, it gives you that. And you oftentimes are going to say it with your shoulders squared, head straight up, looking whoever it is direct in the eye, and mean that with everything you've got. Home gives you some bit of family, some bit of inclusion, some bit of belonging, some bit of attachment. Um, Home also gives you some bit of restoration. That's another major importance of home. When the world beats you up, you can go home for restoration. Remember, as a little kid, and you're going to school, and the kids are dogging you out because you've got on a pair of jeans that everyone else doesn't wear, whatever the case may be. So you're feeling bad, and you go home, and whoever's in your home is hopefully you're having that discussion with them, and they're giving you a sense of restoration. um, yeah, you can do it. You don't worry about the genes. And if we need to change the genes, they may or may not, or they may just encourage you to overcome that, to fly above that, because the problem is really the other kids and not you. Um, but home is like your first hospital. It's the when you're sick, that's where you get your first healings. It's the first police station. When you get into a fight with your siblings, your parents or whomever your guardians are, they're the police. It's your first responder in life, period, overall. Um, the additional restoration, I guess, if you will, in home would come from, you've moved out, and for whatever reason you go back home to visit, and you may look at your old room, if it's still your old room, or it probably is, and it's been converted to, craft room, or somebody else's room, or a den, or something else like that. But when you look at it, you see the craft room now, but you also see the room as it was when you lived in it. Some of us are fortunate enough to have our rooms left just the way they were, or maybe not the way they were. They're clean now, hopefully not dusty and all of that. But your room is still there, to where you can go back to it. Especially those who are younger. Parents tend not to convert the rooms immediately when the kids move out. They tend to give them a while to kind of get out there and get stable before they take those rooms over for other things. But when you go home now for your restoration, you go home for an apple pie. You go home for mom's, Sunday fresh pancakes from scratch, not out of a box. You go home to hear her loving on you and nagging you all at the same time. And somehow all of that strengthens the fighter in you. And sometimes you can't go home. Sometimes you got to go in your mind home and replay some of those things. And what that does is that strengthens the fighter in you. It strengthens your inner you, so you can again square up and say, okay, let me put on my gloves and let me do this challenge or this thing of life, whatever it is you're dealing with, another round. And so you're able to get up and go again. So these are all the things that are necessary to keep you strong in a cruel and violent world. And I don't need to tell you, this world is cruel, it's violent, it's wicked. Wickedness abounds in just everywhere, just every corner. And shit, and it's not even in the corner now, it's right smack on the street. Um, these are the things that will help you stand in the adversities that you're going to face. Not that you might face, but that you are going to face. Especially if you're empathic or have any kind of spiritual connection or strength, you're going to face, I think, more adversities, just because there are a whole lot of people who aren't. There are a whole lot of people who are either lost, they're confused, or they just downright don't want any kind of good spirituality going on, and so they're going to come against you in various ways. But these importances of home, they also remind you um, that, the world is riding you. The world is literally riding on your back. But as I mentioned the example earlier, you come from a long line of successful people in whatever their levels of success were. And that doesn't mean you don't have a drug addict, an alcoholic, a, um, a forever student that never gets out of school and does nothing with their lives but continue to go to school. And I shouldn't say nothing because learning is a great tool. You just got to do something else. For whatever reason, the one who's got a whole bunch of babies all over the place and is not working, the drug dealer, whatever, what different families may call low lives or the lower ones or the underachievers. Doesn't matter that you have that. You also have some others who have risen above that, who've reached it and reached some goals. And so all these things seek to remind you of that, and actually from both sides. This is what you could be over here with the drug dealer or the drug addict or underachieving, or you could be up here with the different side of the family of home, achieving and accomplishing and that sort of thing. But what all of it says, pretty much in a nutshell, if you push through it, you can get to it, to keep going. It's in you to make it. Um, and you just have to keep pushing through. It says that you come from a long line of hardworking men and women. So giving up is not an option. Let's be real. Even the crack addict hasn't given up because they're still reaching for their crack. Now, their goal may be off, but they're still pushing for it. Even the perpetual student, they haven't given up. They might need to look at their goals and kind of adjust them at some point in life, but they're still a perpetual student. It says you come from a long line of ancestors who fought and sacrificed so that you could be here. That's powerful. That's powerful. So it's not just the ones that you could actually see here in the natural world. How many more images like this one go generations through generations prior to yours? And all of that is what you came from. So if you just do rough percentages, let's say if 10% were underachievers and 90% were, whatever their level of achievement may have been, and you come from how many generations of that, and they sacrificed and struggled and pushed and so that you could be here making your stab at this or taking your stab at this. Now let's think about those who don't have a home or not one that they derive, any of these priceless jewels, if you will, from. And there are some. The girl that, when you bring up home and she dismisses home for whatever reason, that tells you there's something going on there. And there may have been a time when home was everything I've said for her, and something changed and it's not. Or there may have been a time where she may not be able to identify a time that home was this for her, because the sad reality is some children grow up and they don't have that. What about the guy who's locked up and he has no one to call, no one looking for him, no one writing him letters, no one trying to send $10 to put on his book so he can get some ramen noodles or some deodorant, or avoid being the cellmate's bitch, or whatever the case may be? What about the runaway who ran away for whatever reason, whether they were hard-headed runaway or whether they ran away because there were some specific circumstances at home that were hurtful to them and they couldn't control it? So they decided running away was the way in which they could control whatever was going on. But now they're out there in the world and they're making foolish choices. They've fallen prey to anyone and anything because they don't have home to tap into to reel them back in, to help reground them, re-strengthen them. Even if it's just for a moment. Even if they can just go home for, a couple of hours and redraw on some of that energy to regroup, let some of those images flow through, push through their mind, and they can go back out and do it. Runaways don't necessarily have that. What about the ones who had homes stolen from them? What about the abused and battered women whose husbands isolated them from their families? Maybe, moved them, and we hear the stories. You marry someone from another culture, another country, go visit their side of the family for a week, and a week turns into life. And before you know it, you can't get out, you can't get your kids out, and you're stuck there. So you are effectively isolated. They're controlling whether you can get out, whether your kids can get out, what you can do. They're controlling whether you're even able to call home, or whether home is able to reach you. And, let's bring it here closer. Just, here, the abused, battered, or under some sort of control spouse who has been isolated from their spouse, even here in the contiguous U.S. What about the kidnapped children who remain with their captors so long that the captor becomes home? We know it is Stockholm Syndrome. People are starting to wake up. And you hear the term all the time, but that's the reality of it. A child is kidnapped, and they've been with the captor so long that becomes home. However dysfunctional it is, however technically illegal it is, that's still home to them. And at some point, they learn to find jewels and love and joy and peace in that home. And they find comfort, oftentimes, in that home. Even though they still have the negativity, they may have the bad memories, but they still have some good memories that they were able to forge in that home. And I'm not talking the physical home. I'm talking the metaphorical home, not the metaphorical. The concept of home, the idea of home, the realm of home. What about black people who had a home, a history, and a heritage stolen from them? So these groups, when we ask why they don't just get themselves together, do I need to go any further? Yeah, for some of you I will. The guy that's locked up, who has no one to call, no one looking for him, well, he's got some physical bars that keep him from just getting himself together. Now, hopefully those bars, actually with the connection to home, whatever his home is, he may very well be in a position where he uses that time more wisely and makes different decisions going forward. But without the connection to home, he may not. He may think of, I have nothing to go home to. There is no home for me, so there's no need for me to do anything different. And that was just one example, but we can kind of go down that list of what I just gave as to how and why people aren't able to get themselves together. But besides not having that home, that support system, that backing to undergird them in, whatever it is they may need to do or trying to do, in addition to wherever they are currently as a result of, what they have or have experienced or are experiencing, they're hindered from being able to just get themselves together. The abused and battered woman who, the husband has got her in another country with his family, and I say woman just because I'm a female, but it's flip-flop because I just ran into a situation very recently where a guy was lured outside the country, and he's in that foreign country with her and her family, and they're restricting him and doing all kinds of stuff to him. But I stay with female and I tend to work with the women, so that's why that term comes up more frequently. Abused and battered women whose husbands have isolated them from their families, they don't have a support system because they've been isolated. And then there's that whole the shaming and the self-esteem and everything else that goes along with being abused and battered that makes it even more difficult. So those are the current things that the current invisible chains, if you will, that she now has on her that make it difficult for her to get up, get herself together, and get out. That make it difficult for her to rise above the situation. What about when we tell someone to go pray to that outside invisible source to help them? Well, you know what? While that woman has you down there in Peru, I'll just pick a country just because. Down there in Peru, doing all that you can do. We're going to pray on our end, and you get it together, and we'll talk to you next week if he's able to steal in a call or something. Or the kidnapped children who remain with their captors for so long, the captor becomes home, and they kind of give up on the real home when they're coming to terms with it, when they're trying to deal with all of that baggage and unpackage it. We tell them, well, you need to pray to that outside invisible source and ask him to heal you from that so you can move forward. We didn't say anything about the current circumstances that they may be in. They just need to pray to that outside source. Well, side note real quick. Even that Bible says the outside invisible source, once you get saved, lives within you. So at some point, stop telling people to keep going outside of themselves to look for something that you yourself have already told them now lives within them. But here's the thing. How dare we expect what took time to create will magically uncreate overnight? For those who are dealing with the Stockholm Syndrome, it took time to get them to that point. So just because they're freed, just because we tell them the truth, just because we've saved them physically from their captor, doesn't mean the home that they created will just dissipate. What they have to do is unlearn and relearn. So the old home has to be unlearned. It took time to learn it. It's going to take time to unlearn it. And then you have to demonstrate to them a new home so that they can learn a new home. And then they can go forward with that new home. It doesn't just happen overnight because, Gestapo or SWAT or whoever it is bust in, rescued them, took them home to their real parents. They've been with this false kidnapping family for 10 years. Take them home to their real family and everything's hunky-dory. Doesn't work that way. But for black people, how many generations did it take to get black people where we are? So an overnight change ain't happening. People are changing at different levels, and they all have different experiences. They have different things that they're dealing with. They have different change, whether they're physical or invisible, that are holding them. We can't expect them just because we've told them, oh, well, you know what, you have the opportunity to return to Africa. You have the opportunity to get reparations. You have the opportunity to do X, Y, Z, whatever, that it's going to automatically happen. And because they haven't done it, it's their fault. We forget to say, okay, yeah, you have all those opportunities, but you also have these other 10 things still working against you. You also have police brutality. You also have lower wages. You also have healthcare issues that have been waged upon you over an extended period of time that also takes time to overcome. You also have the infighting that has been waged within your lineage, if you will, or within your group for a couple generations that you also have to overcome. You have the physical redlining to live in certain neighborhoods and districts that don't have access to stuff. That was systematic. It was systemized. It was put in place. So just to say you have the opportunity to do better, you have the opportunity to rise above now that we're understanding what's going on, you have the opportunity to pack up and move to one of the African countries or whatever it is. It's not that simple. It took time to get where they are. It's going to take some time. And don't get me, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I just need people to understand we're all at different levels, and everyone is not going to be on the same level that you're on. For whatever reason, it's for their particular experience, and thus we don't down someone because they are further than the other one. We just need to give them the information and try to help guide them, but while we're still moving forward. But how many months, how many years did it take for the battered wife to be beat down so bad she can't hear you tell her something, and voila, she's just step up and into action? And sometimes all it takes is months, especially if she was vulnerable from the beginning. It doesn't take 3, 4, 5, 10 years of being a battered wife. Actually, I gave this example to someone the other day. You could be married for 2 months, and in those 2 months, that man can take everything you've got. He can berate you and belittle you so much every single day, and then he can turn around and take a knife to your throat. He's in those 3 months, he has done more damage to you than you may have seen in your entire life. So, in the eyes of the law, the fact that you all were only married for 3 months does not negate the damage that was done. In the eyes of your auntie who got her head in the damn sand, the fact that you only married to him for 3 months has no bearing on the damage that he did to you while you were there. So you don't get to expect her to just pick up and everything's hunky-dory. What you do get to do is give her home, reconnect her with home, so that she, and then obviously deal with the trauma, so that she can rebuild, she can reconnect, she can get through the trauma of those 3 months. And then she can step up and into. And there's no set answer one way or another for any of this, but I just wanted each of us to think as we lay judgment on people, as we tell black people they are where they are because they choose to be. A lot of them are just so damn stupid and ignorant, and I shouldn't say damn. I'm just kind of getting frustrated with a few of them recently, but are still stupid and ignorant and choose to stay there. They choose not to hear different. And when I say that, I'm referencing the ones who want to come back at you when you're giving them information so violently, so vehemently, so adamantly, so aggressively, and then want to attack you. Take the information, use it, don't use it. Then there are those who are just still stuck in la la land, that when you give them, hey, there's more, there's better, we can do better, you can do better, and they look at you and they agree, but they have no idea of how to even act upon it. So you plant your seed and you go on. And then there is the example that the battered spouse who's only been married for 3 months. And because they're not able to, and someone comes in, you rescue the situation, okay, you figured out it's a battered person, you get them out. But how much damage was done in those 3 months? You can't expect them to just pack up or pick up and everything's hunky-dory. Now you have a whole lot of stuff to unpack, and it could take 3 months, it could take 3 years, it could take 30 years, depending on how deep it cut. The person, the male that I'm familiar with is in a very similar situation right now. Same thing. Talk to him. Seems like he's getting it. But of course, he still has those forces that are in his ear that are working against anything different. So he's still with the forces because he's been with them so long, and he doesn't realize they don't have his best interests. So he's still thinking, even though it's dysfunctional, even though they're messing him over, he still believes that they are best for him. So it takes time. There's a part of him that wants to come out of it. There's a part of him that realizes, wait a minute, something's not right here, but he's still stuck. Kind of Stockholm syndrome a little bit, if you will. But think of these things as we lay judgment on people. As we deny someone in these situations that are trying to find their way back to home, as we deny them a map to get home, as we deny them a bus ride, a sense of direction, shit, damn, a cup of water for the walk. They're still moving, they're still trying. May not be as fast as you want it to be, but they are still trying to get there. Forces are still working against them as they're trying. Even if they can't take but a 1-inch step, trust and believe there's a force that's working, trying to push them back 6 feet to that 1-inch step that they took. Maybe help relieve some of those forces that they're working with, those other outside or tangent things going on. But just don't be a hindrance to them. Help people get to that home. Help them to find that home, reconnect with that home, reconnect with that lineage, reconnect with that heritage, reconnect with all of those before them that encountered a lot of what they're currently encountering, and maybe even more, or so, in some cases less, and was still able to rise above. So when I say all of that, the biggest concern is black people. We're trying to get there. There are a lot of black people that are trying to get there. Don't shoot them. Don't be a hindrance to them. If you're not ready to move, move out the way. But in the meantime, allow people to connect so that they can go ahead and get to their home. Whatever that home is, and they can get to their better. And they can move and do some things. Take care and be blessed.